Hello and welcome to the sixth part of this RWBY fanfiction reading of I Need You So Bad by PrismaticBumbleby. We're in chapter 19-ish. I don't exactly remember. We'll figure it out. Or, I don't know, something like that. There's already been some, problems, because of course there was one that we skipped, which wasn't actually a chapter, and then one that was kind of something that I didn't want to read, as you probably know if you watched the last one. So, celebrate. Let's go. Yang smiled as she stared into the mirror. Her blonde locks were up in a ponytail as she scanned over her face. Yang was pretty much dolled up for a very special occasion. It normally wasn't like her to be getting all pretty for anything, unless it was really important to her. Yang's eyes slowly drifted down to a necklace that was currently around her neck. It was gold and... oh, that was not okay. It was gold and had a small gem in the middle, an amber gem to be exact. Yang felt her smile widen as she reached up and began moving it between her fingers. Yang had received the gift from someone, but she wasn't sure who. All that came with it was a note saying, "Congrats on your wedding to come," or something like that. Yang forgot, but it was a sweet gesture. Yang turned away from the mirror and looked around the empty dorm. A silence was soon disrupted by a familiar ringtone she set on her scroll for the heiress. Yang picked up the scroll from the nearby nightstand and put it up to her ear. "Hello, Weiss?" Weiss's voice came in a rather easy tone as she spoke to Yang. "Hey, I'm heading up to get you. Blake and Ruby are waiting in the courtyard. I managed to find us an airship to take us to downtown Vale." "Okay, I'll meet you halfway then. I just have to get my money and that's it," Yang responded as she shuffled towards her nightstand, opening the drawer and pulling out some of the money that her father had sent her. "Alright, try not to be too long," Weiss responded and pressed the button to end the call. Yang nodded to herself as she placed her money and scroll into her pockets and then headed out the door after locking it behind herself. The four decided it'd be a good idea to celebrate being halfway finished with Beacon and for Yang and Blake's wedding that could happen any day now. Weiss was entrusted on finding the perfect spot, time, day, and decor of the wedding. Weiss took this as a serious mission, which made the Bumblebee duo feel completely at ease knowing the Schnee would be looking out for them. Weiss did, in fact, have everything planned out. She had found the exact place she wanted the wedding to take place, and even the time. As for decor and date, that was a different story. Yang had eventually met up with the heiress and began heading back towards the courtyard. "So, how's everything coming along, Weiss?" Yang asked, as her lilac hues looking down at the heiress slightly, who shrugged slightly again. "I have everything under control. I just don't want Ruby to blab about anything, so I didn't tell her my plans," Weiss responded as she continued walking with the brawler. The two eventually made it to the exit of the dormitories, stepping out and feeling the cool autumn air hit and nip at their cheeks. Weiss and Yang soon met up with the rest of their team. Ruby was dressed in a casual dress with her cloak and normal boots. Blake was in a dress as well, nothing flashy, just a normal dress. Yang made her way closer to the faunus, smiling as she came face to face with the ravenette. A small giggle left her as she pecked Blake's forehead. "Hey kitten, ready?" Blake nodded as she looked back at Ruby and Weiss, who at the moment were currently teasing each other. Well, mainly Ruby teasing Weiss. "Yeah, let's go, Yang. Might want to tell them to come on, though," Blake responded as she began to walk towards the airship. Yang's hand intertwined with her own. "They're way ahead of you," Yang responded as she heard quick footsteps behind them, indicating that the two girls decided to quit teasing and follow. Once the girls were in Vale's downtown district, they headed straight to one of the many restaurants. This one, however, wasn't fancy, but it wasn't one of the weird fast food eateries with greasy food either. Due to Weiss's title, the waitress had assigned them a table before anyone else. It was a privilege, but as much as Weiss enjoyed it, she didn't want it to happen whenever she sat at a restaurant. The four sat down at one of the booths in the back, a window on the side of them to look out at the sunset. Best seat in the house, apparently. Yang picked up the menu as she watched her team do the same, her lilac hues scanning over the many dishes that could be prepared for a mouth-watering meal. Ruby began speaking, causing Yang to look from the menu and to see a new waitress standing with a notepad and pen. Do you have strawberry lemonade?" Ruby asked, which earned a nod from the waitress and began writing down the beverage name. Soon the woman turned to Yang. "And what would you like, miss?" Yang smiled as she looked around at her teammates for a moment. "I'll just have a water this time." The waitress nodded and headed away from the table, leaving the girls to carry on with their conversations. Yang was the first one to break the silence. So, does anyone know what they want? Everyone but her had decided. Blake was getting some type of grilled fish with tuna as a side. Wow. Surprising, right? Weiss was getting some sort of salad that Yang couldn't pronounce. It was, well, obviously one of the more expensive dishes on the menu. Ruby had decided on getting some sort of chicken sandwich. She thought it'd be some nice to try something new. What was Yang going to have? Yang skimmed over the menu one last time before her eyes locked onto something that sounded absolutely amazing. Popcorn chicken, mashed potatoes, and some things called wedges. Yang was definitely going to give this a try. When the waitress came back to their table with their food, all four of them seemed more interested in talking than eating. Hey, so where's the wedding gonna be at? Ruby whispered to her partner, which caused Weiss to stare down at the small leader. If I tell you, you cannot mention it to Ruby or Blake, Weiss whispered back, which caused Ruby to nod in an understanding manner. I'm thinking outside your home in Patch, Ruby, Weiss said quietly, which caused Ruby to smile with glee, nodding and looking back at her sister slightly. She'd love that. Weiss, do you have a date set? Ruby asked, moving away from the heiress more as she took a bite of her sandwich from her plate. Weiss thought for a moment before speaking aloud for the other girls to hear. The wedding is going to be on December 18th. The Bumblebee duo turned their attention to the heiress and gave a nod. All right, I'll be sure to be ready for it then, Weiss, Yang responded. Blake gave a casual nod and smile as she returned to her food. Yang slowly began scooting over to Blake more, eventually wrapping an arm around her fiancé's frame as she began giggling. Blake turned her head towards the blonde, her bow twitching slightly. What's so funny? Yang grinned and leaned up, pressing a small kiss to Blake's lips. Nothing, I'm just thinking about our wedding already. Blake's cheeks slowly began to heat up as she listened to the blonde's words. She gave a nod as she leaned and began to press a kiss into Yang's golden locks. The wedding was going to be one of the best ones ever. Weiss was going to make sure of that. Oh boy. Trying. That's a great name for a chapter. Yang sighed nervously as she looked around the clothes shop. The blonde was with the heiress of the team looking for a dress to be tailor-made to fit her perfectly. Weiss crossed her arms as she waited for the tailor to come over to her and her partner. Weiss, do we really need to do this now? I mean, we're still in Beacon, Yang mumbled to the heiress. Weiss turned her head around to Yang and shook her head. Okay, no, we're about to be out of Beacon, and I want you and Blake to have a nice wedding, and you with a nice dress. Yang sighed again and leaned back in her chair, looking around for something to entertain herself with. However, there wasn't any need. The tailor had already come over to the two of them. Hello, I'm Katie. Who's getting fitted? The tailor asked, her eyes looking over the two of the girls. Weiss motioned over to her teammate. That'd be her. We already went over the designs and written them down on paper. So after she's done, we need to be on our way. Hopefully that isn't too much trouble. Katie shook her head and nodded. That's fine. Normally asking how you'd want it to be designed would take forever, so it's understandable. Anyways, come with me, miss, and we'll get you fitted. Yang nodded as she leaned up from her chair and headed to the fitting room with the tailor. Once Yang was fitted, Yang stepped out and walked over to Weiss. So how'd it go? Weiss asked, her brow quirked slightly out of curiosity. Bad. Apparently my bust is too big for any of the sizes here, so it'll be over 2,000 to get it to fit me, Yang mentioned with a serious tone of voice. What? That's absurd. Are you serious, Yang? Weiss asked. Oh well. Orwell yelled at her friend. Yang began to grin and shake her head. No, I'm just messing around, Weiss. Of course. Weiss felt her eyebrow twitch as she stared at her teammate. Her icy blues locked on Yang's bust. If you joke about that again, I'm popping them. All right. Yang's grin only grew as she listened to her teammate's threat. Oh, come on, Weiss. It can be kind of funny. Plus, body augments can't be made until you're like 25. I don't know. You're just angry that because you haven't developed yet. God. Hey, I've grown slightly, Weiss mumbled as she stared down at her chest. And I'm sure Ruby still loves you, Yang mentioned with a small giggle before tugging Weiss out of the store by her arm. Weiss' cheeks only continued to brighten as she heard Yang's teasing, but attempted to pay it no mind. Yang looked around the street for a moment before she began to feel her phone vibrating in her pocket. Yang took her phone out of her pocket and checked to see who it was. It was Blake. Good. Time to see where she was. Hey, Blake, where you at? Yang asked, looking around for any indication of her fiance that could be given, whether it was Blake's bow or unforgettable hair. At a cafe with your sister. I think we're not actually too far from that store that you and Weiss are at. Also, Ruby says hi, Blake responded on the other end of the call, which made Yang smile. Okay, I'll be there. I'll meet you guys there. It's called Swell Cafe, right? And tell Ruby I'll be there to say hi in person, Yang responded and hung up her phone after the confirmation from Blake at which cafe they were at. Blake looked up at the red-haired huntress with a smile as she nodded at her. She says she'll say hi when she gets here, Ruby groaned and nodded. Oh, okay, that's fine. Eventually, Ruby and Blake had ordered drinks for the four of them when Weiss and Yang had arrived, and soon enough they did. Yang smiled once she locked eyes with the raven-haired huntress, walking over and sitting down next to her fiancé. Hey, Blakey, kept you waiting, didn't we? Yang said with a cheesy grin, which was met with a flick of her forehead. Ouch, okay, sorry, we kept you two waiting, Yang mumbled, leaning away and looking down at the drink that was placed in front of her. Weiss leaned over and began to whisper to her partner, making sure that Yang and Blake couldn't hear them. Your sister seems to be pretty under control whenever Blake's around. Like, normally she's always making puns and jokes. Ruby shrugged slightly and began whispering back. I think it's because they're about to get married. Yang tends to try to forget about it and try to make jokes to forget about stress and worry. Weiss nodded slowly, understanding what the slightly smaller girl had stated. Grabbing her mug and taking a small sip, Blake kept her eyes locked on Yang, which made Yang shift slightly. Feeling embarrassment run over her body, the more the fauna stared at her. What? Yang asked, tilting her head slightly to look at the girl. Lilac hues meeting sharp amber. Your face is so red. Also, you seem troubled, Blake responded, a smirk beginning to crawl onto her features as she reached and held onto Yang's hand. Yang felt her gaze drop as her entire face began to light up with a crimson hue that was pretty noticeable. Yang's hand slowly squeezed Blake's own in a gentle manner before she gave a nervous chuckle. You're just thinking about the wedding is all? Yeah, Blake smiled and leaned over, whispering into Yang's ear. Really? Because I would have thought you'd be worried about tonight. Yang was confused. What did the raven-haired girl mean? What's tonight? Yang asked quietly, leaning a bit closer to make sure that she'd be the only one to hear. Fun. That's all I'm going to say, Yang, Blake said, her smirk growing wider. Yang's own lips began curling into a smirk as she looked over the girl. Okay, but this time it's my turn to have some fun first. Okay. Not sure about that one. A little bit scared now. Yeah, this is wonderful. God, stop it. We've gone so far. 1 week. 1 whole week until Blake and Yang's wedding. The time had been seeming to go quite quickly for the two girls to be married. While one was completely calm, the other was almost in a stress state as she paced around the room. Around the dorm room. Weiss looked up at the raven-haired faunus that was pacing continuously. Something important was on the girl's mind. Weiss had to know. Blake, what's the matter? Nothing seems wrong. There's something seems wrong. Wow. Weiss asked, causing Blake to stop and sigh, moving to her own bed to sit across from the heiress. It's the wedding. I'm not having second thoughts, just really nervous that I'm going to screw up somehow, Blake admitted, which Weiss nodded in response to show that she was listening, and Blake continued. I mean, I don't want one screw-up to cost us of something so perfect, you know? I mean, all I want is to be next to her. Plus, we're going to be in front of her father, and what if he doesn't like me? I don't think... Stop, Weiss cut in, causing Blake to stop her rambling and turn her attention to the heiress. Everything will be fine, especially if I'm overlooking this wedding. Also, from what Ruby has told me, Taiyang is very kind and nurturing. To an extent, obviously. Weiss said, standing from her bed and walking over to the small desk that had been used by the team to discuss many plans, whether it be grades or for something like going out for the night. The bond between Team RWBY was strong and almost unshakable. At times, Weiss Schnee made sure it would never falter. However, Team RWBY's time as a team was coming to a close with graduation night around the corner. Also, I highly doubt that there's anything you could do to upset Yang. She loves you, and I know that you love her. It's completely clear, Weiss mentioned as she moved and sat on the desk, looking to her teammate. Blake shrugged and nodded slowly. I guess you're right, Weiss. Maybe I just need to relax. Weiss smiled at the fondest response and leaned back against the desk in an almost carefree attitude. Good, we need to focus on graduation for now. The wedding preparations are already finished and the invites have been given out already. There's nothing to worry about. Blake nodded and turned her head to the dorm door that slowly opened, revealing the slightly taller Rose leader. Blake hadn't noticed it at first, but her and her team had indeed changed over the past few years. RWBY was taller, had her hair slightly grown out. Weiss was still short, but her chest seemed bigger. The hair managed to get longer, and she was laid back, which was a miracle. However, Blake knew that the heiress would still rip someone's head off if they crossed in line. Blake hadn't noticed much of a change in herself, other than her hair being a bit more longer. Then that was pretty much it. The only major change Blake saw in herself was their attitude, and it changed for the better, in her opinion. Then there was Yang. Yang had definitely changed quite a bit. Before Blake and her started dating, Yang was so closed off and constantly flirting jokes with Blake and others. That's what they were, jokes. But now it seemed to be totally different. Yang was still wild and outgoing and full of puns. Yang was a lot more open with Blake and her team about herself. Blake quite honestly loved these changes. They brought her and her team happiness, and she wasn't going to give it up for anything. Even if the whole world turned against her, she knew her friends and fiancé would still be there to stand with her against the dark. All of them, in so many ways, have matured into full-grown women. Well, RWBY isn't fully grown yet, but she has still matured. Blake never felt alone when she was around her team, and if she was alone, all she had to do was think of them, and especially Yang. Team RWBY had the highest grades of all the teams in Beacon. All of them trained and studied countless hours just to make sure that they'd pass. Not as an individual, but as a team. Blake watched as RWBY walked over to the heiress and picked her up and spin her around. It brought a smile on her face. Some stupid rule the professor had made for partners to be decided had brought... What? Some stupid rule that the professor had made for the partners to be decided had brought happiness to her life. Okay, whatever. RWBY was happy with Weiss, and Weiss was happy with RWBY. Blake knew the feeling was mutual between her and Yang. It's been proven countless times. Blake, Yang is coming up now. She brought you a gift. RWBY said as she looked over to Blake, which caused her to look up and nod at her friend. She was right. Yang soon came in, holding a bag with a huge smile plastered across her features. Hey, Blakey, Yang called and handed her fiancé the bag. There's a box inside. Open it. It's my gift to you. I hope you like it. Also, there's a shirt. Yang said as she sat next to Blake. Blake nodded and took out the shirt first, holding it up to see what was written and drawn. And the shirt was absolutely beautiful, and it looked like it was bought from one of those upper-class stores. Blake felt her heart already beginning to beat and her cheeks heating up at the first gift. Then she reached in and pulled out a small box. Blake opened the small box and looked inside to see a small crimson ribbon waiting to be tied into a bow. I know you aren't that comfortable yet with people knowing you're a faunus, so I thought you'd like a new bow, you know? Like what I see there? Let's see. Wow. See what I did there? Yang grinned and snickered at her comment. Blake rolled her eyes and turned to the blonde, pressing her lips against Yang's own gently. When they broke, Blake softly whispered, You're a dolt, but a cute one, and well, I love you. But I'm your dolt, heiress, Blake. Don't do that. You call me a dolt. Weiss looked over and rolled her eyes, laying her head onto RWBY's hair, pressing a gentle kiss to the girl's head. You told Tai Yang that their wedding is happening this weekend, right? Yep, I told you, Weiss. You can trust me with that. He's bringing everyone he can. Even Ozpin is coming. Good. Graduation! Well, today was finally the day. Graduation from Beacon Academy. Blake sighed softly as she sat next to her teammates, her bow flickering as she listened to Ozpin speaking to a large crowd that had gathered for the ceremony. There had to be at least over 1,000 people. Blake felt the anticipation beginning to eat away at her, as well as the anxiety. 4 full years with her team, and she still got nervous in front of large crowds. Who knows who could be out there? Maybe Yang and RWBY's father, Weiss's father? Regardless, Blake knew that she couldn't let her team go go out there without her. And soon enough, the four of them heard their names being called. Yang grinned and grabbed her fiance's hand and pulled her up. "Come on, Blake, they're waiting on us." Blake was snapped out of her trance as she heard the blonde's voice, which caused a smile to curl onto her features. The raven-haired fauness nodded and began to walk out onto the stage with the blonde-haired teen. Blake's amber hues scanned out at the large crowd that began to cheer as her team came onto the stage. It made her feel even more nervous, but a gentle squeeze to her hand brought her back. Yang leaned over and began to whisper, "Hey, relax, Blake. I'm here. Don't worry, okay?" Blake felt her body beginning to relax slightly from the other girl's words. Ozpin smiled as the cheers began to die down, and then he spoke. "Once again, thank you all for coming out for this very special day for all of these children. Well, I should be calling them adults. All of them have matured and gotten stronger than I could ever imagine. However, right now, let's focus on Team RWBY. 4 years ago, this team was brought together, and it had possibly been one of the most successful ones in this school's history. I'm very privileged to have had these 4 students. Ruby Rose, the team leader, has proven herself very capable of leading a team into victory. Wai-Shni, the teammate of Ruby Rose, has proven that she is capable of aiding her team with the support and tactics. Blake Belladonna, the teammate of Yang Xiaolong, has shown herself as a swift striker and very good at providing insight into certain things. And Yang Xiaolong, teammate of Blake Belladonna and sister of Ruby Rose. Yeah, that's my girls! A random voice yelled out from the crowd, and Ruby and Yang instantly could tell who that was. "Really, Dad?" Yang mumbled, and Ruby just smiled and began to wave to the tall blonde-haired male that was right at the front. Anyways, Yang has shown that she is a very capable fighter with a very good tolerance for pain. All 4 of these students are absolutely phenomenal. They have went on missions that some of our past seniors couldn't even compete or dream of doing. I'm proud to call these 4 huntresses. I look forward to see great things for you I look forward to see the great things you 4 can do in the future. Once Ozpin finished, the crowd cheered even louder for the 4 girls. The 4 smiled at the crowd and then received what seemed to be a diploma and a card with their pictures and names on them. Ruby moved off stage and the rest of the team followed. Once the 4 of them were off of the stage, they were met by the tall blonde-haired man that had yelled out during Ozpin's speech. Well, if it isn't Team RWBY. Come here, girls," Taeyang said with a wide grin. He held out his arms for his daughters. Yang and Ruby moved over to hug the tall blonde-haired man that was their father. After about a few seconds, they pulled away from each other and Yang moved over to Blake. Yang gripped Blake's wrist gently and began to pull her over. "Dad, meet Blake. She's the one that proposed to me," Yang said sheepishly as her cheeks began to heat up slightly. Blake raised her hand and waved slightly. "Hi, sir." Taeyang only felt his grin getting wider as he began to laugh. "Blake, you don't have to be nervous around me. You're going to be marrying my daughter. You obviously make her happy, so there's no need to be nervous." I'm glad to see that Yang has finally gotten with someone. "Oh, I remember when she was younger. She would always try to play 2 different girls and ask herself out." "Dad!" Yang called out, her eyes becoming a mixture of pink and crimson as she stared at her father with embarrassment and anger. Right, some other time. But anyways, come on, bring it in, Blake," Taeyang said, and he pulled the raven-haired fauness into one of his classic hugs. Blake wanted to pull away from the unexpected hug, but it felt nice to have the approval from Yang's father. Taeyang pulled away and nodded at Blake. "Thank you for being there for my daughter," he whispered, and moved to meet the heiress and do the same he had done to Blake. Eventually, Taeyang had moved back to stand in front of the 4 girls. "I hope you all are packed up. We're heading back to Patch to prepare for the wedding," Tai said and looked at the 4 girls. The 4 nodded and Yang spoke up. "We just gotta go get our stuff from the dorm. We won't be long." Tai nodded and waved the girls off and began to head out of the ceremony. Yang, Blake, Ruby, and Weiss had made it back to their room. Ruby giggled and bumped into Weiss a bit just to play around with the heiress. "You're gonna love it back in Patch, Weiss. Trust me, it's absolutely beautiful there, which I think it's snowing right now, but it still looks beautiful." Weiss nodded and bumped back into the silver-eyed girl. "Well, I'm sure I'll enjoy it there." The 4 stood in their dorm room remembering all the good times they had there. They wouldn't be able to return there, but there would always be the memory of their team. "Oh, by the way, Osmond said we can take our team plate off the door and keep it if we want. We just gotta let him know before we leave today and he'll ship it to us," Yang said and moved to grab her bags. "I already told him, sis. I asked him to send it back to our home." I asked him to send it to our home back at Patch. Ruby responded and did the same as her sister, grabbing her bags with Weiss and left the room with the heiress. Blake moved to the window and looked out at the view they had and sighed softly. Yang, it's gonna suck not being here anymore. I'm actually going to miss it. All of our old memories are going to be gone. Yang moved and smiled, grabbing Blake's hand and turning her head so that they were face to face. Well, that's why we're going to make new memories. Together. I love you, Blake. We're going to be happy together. Just wait until this weekend. Our wedding is going to be just perfect. I know it. Blake felt the smile coming back to her lips as she nodded and leaned up, pressing her lips against Yang's own. And you know that I love you, Yang. I do. Oh my god. So, we have a few parts left, so we're going to save the rest of the parts of this story for the next episode, which will actually not be after an episode of Ice Cream, because we finished that right before this one. So yeah, we'll have something new in between this, which, you know, I am going to split it up a little bit, even though it doesn't need to be. We're going to split it up. So yeah, that was part 6. Next time, part 7 with A Night Before, which I can only assume that this is like actually a chapter I want to read. So we'll see what happens. Yeah.